scene is set several hours after, well, after several hours of Edwin sitting in a coffee shop, writing emails, looking for squatting locations. Well, or at least candidates. It's been walking for just under an hour, nearly an hour. South towards his old neighborhood in Franklin Heights, where his home was. If not for the bulk that he carries, he'd be able to move a lot faster, but in truth, practicality is only second in his list of priorities. He misses his father. Wants to check in on him. That inner urge, that primordial part of him is pulling him, or so somebody a little bit wiser than he would understand. He can't exactly explain it, but he just feels pulled inexplicably to this location. He doesn't resist it, though. Walking as he does, he eventually finds his way across the bridge into the area that he's heading. The lights of industrial warehouses and docks off in the distance. Appear at least somewhat marvelous to him. The street lights and house lights within the residential areas, from the houses, the apartments, which are more numerous in this area, some flickering, and even in the dim light of the streets, where there are street lights, the ones that have not been broken, look like nothing remarkable whatsoever. There's nothing but blight. This doesn't surprise him, though. Over the years of his childhood and adolescence, the neighborhood he remembers was a lot better. Was never a model of peaceful living. There was always trouble. But anymore, what he sees is like a black stain. Lazy individuals looking for easy money, peddling drugs to anyone and everyone. Disgusts him. He pushes on, though. He doesn't walk directly within streetlights, but he walks within range of a lit area. More towards, the shadows of the lights than within the lights themselves. Um, he doesn't take some of the busiest streets, and he keeps himself alert and aware of the activity around. If the crowd appears too rough, he avoids it, just to try to get to the family home. Eventually, he does make it. He sees at this hour, as it's approaching 11:30 or midnight, he sees the familiar vehicle of his father, a sturdy-looking sedan, four-door. There aren't too many lights on in the windows. He pulls the hood back over his head, and he begins to make his way around the house towards the fence bordering a backyard, or the gate, I should say. He checks the gate to see if it's locked. He doesn't always remember this being the case, but on occasion. As last he remembers, there is a lock on the gate. He looks around to make sure no one is looking. Couple people he sees off in the distance across the street. He steps away from the gate a little bit, crouches down behind the vehicle, waiting for them to pass. Once they do, he begins to quietly make his way over the gate. I will make a dexterity and athletics. Difficulty 7. He is burdened. Trying to climb the gate with the toolbox in his hand. The first time finds him slipping, falling onto the ground, toolbox clattering. Couple people off in the couple people and adjoining buildings. He hears nobody comes outside. He quickly brushes himself off a little bit, looks around. Shit. Ugh. Realizing the mistake, trying to do it with one hand. One empty hand and a full hand. He takes it a little slower. Finding better bracing points. Or better handholds. He takes his time. He doesn't try to hop or leap over the fence. He climbs over it. Eventually, he does make it. When his feet touch the ground on the inside of the fence within the backyard that was so familiar to him, now seems alien, seems different. He thinks he hears somebody coming outside or heading to the back to check. Perhaps they heard the noise of his footfalls. Is simply somebody traversing the floor space of the house. He walks around the back. To see if there's if the familiar shed, little tin shed, is still standing. Coming around the corner, he does see that same small, familiar structure. Passing the back door of the house. Its small paved patio area. Not much of a patio. A square landing. He sees through a crack in the windshield, or in the window. Or he sees through a crack in the curtain. His father making himself something to eat. Safe. He can slightly hear the TV, putting his ear closer to the glass without pressing against it. Makes his way away from the door, crouching beneath a window and towards the shed. The doors being not locked. He puts his hand on it and begins to. Oh, no, I won't do that. He puts his hand upon the door, slowly begins to slide it open. There's a bit of a squeak, a bit of a metal squeal or a screech as he does it. He stops abruptly, opening it, listens. And then begins to eke it open a little bit more. It takes some time. He stops a few times and steps to the other side of the shed, but eventually gets the small sliding door open. Pulling his toolbox into the shed, he grabs for one small set of screwdrivers and a small multimeter and places it within his laptop bag, securing, zipping, closing the bag, and then closing the toolbox afterwards. With his cell phone on at this point, just to cast a little bit of light from the screen. He closes the toolbox back up and places it under a shelf. Slightly out of sight. Remembering the corner. Slight disturbance of dust or dirt and the tool that it's sitting behind. He shuts the light off his phone and places it back into a pocket. Makes his way outside, securing the bag, pulling the strap a little tighter to his chest, and moving it toward his side or back. Closes the shed door, slowly taking his time to try to reduce the metal screeching or grating. After some time, rather than go back the way he came, he hops over, or he kind of props his foot up on the fence to check the back, or to check over it for any people. Doesn't see anyone. The lights of the adjoining house are off. One foot after another, keeping his body close, unsure about climbing such a routine structure. Eventually makes it over to the other side, keeping his body close to the fence. He makes his way towards the gate, this one being unlocked. Walks right out, hood pulled back up over his head, begins walking down the street. Walks for a couple blocks, feeling the same growling, near emptiness in the pit of his stomach. The few people that he does see on the streets in this area at this hour, every single one of them makes his mouth water even more. He remembers the simple message he was told: don't go hungry. Uncertain and guilty. He looks for somebody to shadow, somebody perhaps acting suspicious, somebody who isn't necessarily a law-abiding citizen, somebody up to no good, not wanting to actually hurt, potentially, an innocent person. Still doesn't make him feel good about it, but let me see. It's going to be a +1 difficulty to perception rolls. So that's going to be difficulty 7 for me. Let me just double check. Okay. Right. He begins looking for such a person. Keeping alert of his surroundings, not wanting to fall prey to the next scumbag on the rise, the next lazy individual, the next illicit predator preying on the weak. Feeling his blood roil, that voice within the back of his mind tugging him in this direction, going after competent prey. He lowers his head ever so slightly, as if stalking down the streets, hood up, glasses against his face. After some time, about an hour, he eventually does find somebody slinking about in between the dark spot in between two apartment buildings. One of them half abandoned, the other barely livable. He sees the direction the man is going in and attempts to skirt around a little bit, just enough to toss a rock against a garbage can to get the man to change direction, to corral, watching every step the man makes. Grabbing this from behind an object on the ground, putting this within a mailbox. He takes note of the man's movements, sees what he finds. Going to make a actual hunting roll. This is within the face. Difficulty 5. And he is playing a game of cat and mouse. So wits and streetwise. Let's see. Yeah. Skirting the man around the man's location, keeping an eye on his every move, occasionally tossing a small pebble, stone, whatever he can find on the ground against an object, anything to make a slight noise, spooking the individual behind him. That's hunting roll. Keeping out of sight when the man turns, moving right when he turns left, and moving left when the man turns right. He realizes that his prey is the man he's following is indeed, well, apparently of a criminal element. The telltale colors of clothing, small articles about him indicating some kind of gang affiliation within the area. Apparently making drop-offs. Edwin doesn't touch the drop-off items at all. He has no interest in the narcotics this individual's peddling. All the while getting closer and closer and closer. After about another hour of following him, the rounds are long. He gets close enough to where when the individual, the youth, turns to the right to make another pickup and delivery, Edwin is to the right, grabbing the man's neck, or grabbing the man about the neck and pinning one arm behind his back, or at least as he hopes. Gonna make a strength and brawl. It's a grappling maneuver. This isn't going to be very good. Yeah. Okay. It's 3. And I will make a counter roll for him. Oppose, strength, and brawl. Oh, Jesus. Just a fail for him, but Edwin catching this scumbag off guard, perfectly grabs him about the throat, forcing him face first against a building, pulling his right arm behind his back as he turns hard, and at that very moment brings his head to sink his teeth, his fangs, into the neck of this gangbanger. Begins to drink his fill. He will take 2 blood points from him. Though Edwin doesn't rush, he takes his time, tries to savor every single moment, which is made even more difficult by a slight off taste within the individual's blood. Lucky me. The strong odor of scented leaf, plant matter, almost aromatic, like an extra strong oregano scented car air freshener. And telltale wooziness in his eyes, as if the world is a little shaky as he stands on his feet. Edwin feels himself involuntarily drinking slower as he feels a strange pit in his stomach open up a hollow, making him feel hungry, even though he's feeding, making him feel absolutely ravenous for the first thing he can get his hands on, and not blood. Eventually taking his fill, he drops the man's arm and cold cocks him across the chin, knocking him out. And just for satisfaction's sake, I'll make a strength roll +1 from my earlier success. Yeah. The individual, the criminal, falls to the ground unconscious. Edwin has a slight thought in his mind. I could make this look convincing. A thought goes through his head of rifling the man's pockets for a wallet or money, cash. The moment that he has that thought, though, he feels a sense of hesitation. He knows that's not right. But at the same time, it would be a way of covering his tracks. He leans back over the man, realizing that the wounds are still open. He licks both holes on the man's neck closed. Wrestling with his conscience, he pats down the pockets. He doesn't find any cash, that's for certain. Only a couple small baggies, or a little bundle of small baggies within his pocket. Edwin takes the small bundle, half a dozen small bags of the substance. He actually doesn't feel bad about this. 6 less people, minimum, won't fall prey to this poison. He takes the small bundle, places it into his laptop bag, and takes the small pistol at the man's waistband away from him. One step at a time. As he walks away, trying to remember what he read, looking for release mechanisms. He eventually gets the clip out of the weapon, and separating the clip from the gun, releasing the chambered round without firing it, places each individual piece into 2 separate trash cans, half a block apart. As he begins to head more towards the rural areas to the south and into the woods, into a small wooded area, hopping over a wall, he begins walking amongst the trees, looking for a hollow or a place to dig a hole to avoid the impending dawn. And I will have him make a wits and survival. Double check survival real quick. Yep. Not finding an adequate hollow in a tree, he settles for trying to dig. It takes him several hours to do so, but eventually he's able to burrow himself barely a hole, covering it with whatever leaves on the ground he can move, or leaf-covered branch, only barely making it underground before the impending dawn, and his daily slumber of death.